What movie do you want to watch? What about Raiders of the Lost Ark from 1981? What? Ew, an old movie? No, we should watch literally anything else.
Wait, why do you not want to watch Raiders?
First off, I don't even know the artistic production, like director, screenwriter, cinematographer, key actors, and other important people whose skills allow the movie to happen. Oh, well, the man who directed Raiders of the Lost Ark is actually Steven Spielberg. You've probably seen one of his movies. But Spielberg was not the only important person working on this film. The story was created by George Lucas, who at this time had written A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. We had Philip Kaufman, who directed Body Snatchers, and we had Steven Spielberg, who had at this point directed Jaws. He'd done Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and he'd done Duel. I mean, the main actors in this film is Harrison Ford playing Indiana Jones, Karen Allen playing his love interest Marion, and Paul Freeman playing the main villain, Balak. Some of the other important names for this film is Lawrence Kasdan playing the screenwriter, Douglas Slocum as the cinematographer, and John Williams as the composer. I mean, with this lineup, it has to be a good movie. Oh yeah, no kidding, that's an impressive lineup. But I have no idea what the movie is even about. Can you give me a brief synopsis of the film? Oh yeah, no, for sure. So we follow Indiana Jones. He's an archaeologist, kind of the swashbuckler rogue kind. He travels around the world looking for artifacts that he can take to a museum. His character is kind of like, he's the good guy of the film, but he definitely is not a great person. But you kind of grow to appreciate that, and you definitely know throughout the film that he's not a great person. His faults come to bite him in the butt a fair amount of the times. So we find out that the Nazis are looking for the Ark of the Covenant so that they can use the powers of the Ark to win the war. And so they task Indiana Jones with finding the Ark before the Nazis can get to it. Indy knows that his former mentor has the artifact that he needs to go find the Ark of the Covenant, so he goes to his former mentor's daughter, who he had a questionable romantic relationship with in the past, and basically asks for her help. She basically kicks him out on his butt, but he pays her a crap ton of money, so she decides to go along with him. And throughout the film, they're basically a duo working together. They travel to Nepal, and there's a fight scene, and Marion gets kidnapped. So later in the film, Indy realizes that the Nazis are digging in the wrong place. So he goes to save Marion, but then realizes that if they find out that Indy was there, they might track him down and then figure out where the Ark is. So he ends up leaving her, which, a little questionable, but, And so he goes and he digs up the Ark, but the Nazis end up finding him, and so they take the Ark. They essentially leave Indy and Marion in a tomb to die while they go take the Ark away. But they survive and they kill a bunch more Nazis, and Indy chases after them. So he runs away to go find the Ark, but they end up capturing him because he isn't willing to destroy the Ark, which is an amazing artifact. So he allows himself and Marion to get captured. But at the end, the Nazis open the Ark, and I don't want to spoil what happens, but... Okay, that does sound pretty cool, but I'm not in the mood for a dark, melodramatic film. I feel like many of these action movies' heroes are always questioning whether they are good or bad guys, and sometimes it can be frustrating. Oh yeah, no, that's a good point. This movie actually doesn't do that. Have you heard of Saturday movie serials? No, I haven't. Okay, so this movie is based off of Saturday movie serials, which were action-adventure movies that would play they were cut up into episodic parts, and they'd play at movie theaters. And so people would go to the movie theater and watch just a clip or a part of a movie, essentially, that was just a big action scene. It would always end on a cliffhanger, so you had to go see the next one. And generally, it was the main character or the love interest were kidnapped, and put into a dangerous trap or a dangerous situation in which they had to use practically brute force to get themselves out. There were chase scenes, and there were lots of action and very little plot, like how a lot of the movies that were made had a lot of plot and very little action. And Indiana Jones is trying to replicate that feeling of the Saturday movie serials. Here, I have an example. This one's from 1941 called Dick Tracy vs. Crime Incorporated, directed by John English and William Whitney.
June, do you think you can make it down that ladder?
Yes.
I want to go back and try to save that record.
And this is a clip of Raiders.
Get back to Cairo. Get us some transport to England. Boat, plane, anything. Meet me at Omar's. Be ready for me. I'm going after that truck. Oh. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go.
You can tell that Raiders takes a lot of inspiration from these films. There are so many of them and so many prime examples. This was just one I found right off the bat. But it's important to know that it isn't like a copy of these, but it's an homage, and it's essentially taking what used to just be Saturday TV for kids and making it into the mainstream media, which, for good or for bad, is the start of the blockbuster. Indiana Jones is almost filmed as like a comic book series. He is larger-than-life caricature of a swashbuckling hero. He survives more than he should with just a whip and a gun. He takes so much damage. He gets punched so much in this movie, and it doesn't even faze him. Everyone in this film is practically a caricature. We have Indiana Jones, who he's got the big hat and the jacket and the whip, which just feels so unrealistic, yet also it fits within this world. And we have the Nazis, which are all just caricatures of evil, conniving people. They're practically going like this throughout the film. They're just evil characters who we aren't supposed to sympathize with, and we're not supposed to decide if they're good or bad characters. We are supposed to know that Indiana Jones, he is the main character, he is the superhero of this film, and the Nazis are the villain of the film. We also see that kind of comic book feel with the camera work being used. When I first watched the film, I was thinking that the camera work was just a little lazy, it was just easy shots, but as I watched it again, I realized that it is simplistic by nature. This story is not supposed to be convoluted. We're not supposed to question what's right or wrong or the morality of any of it. We are supposed to see what is happening through the camera work, and we are supposed to see the action that Indiana Jones is performing. The camera work is set up so that you can see the punch winding up before he comes in. And practically, there's a bubble above the character for the big POW sign that sits in a comic book. Also, another interesting thing to know before you watch this film is that Steven Spielberg is a Jewish director. He had directed Schindler's List, which many would consider to be the most important Holocaust movie ever made. It's heart-wrenching and incredibly important to watch if you can stomach it. And so the fact that this film is essentially Indy beating up Nazis for an hour and 50 minutes straight feels a bit like Steven Spielberg wanting to make a superhero character for 12-year-old him. Another interesting thing about it is that Hitler is trying to take the Ark of the Covenant, which is a important artifact to the Jewish culture, and use it to win the war and essentially destroy the Jews. And so the poetic justice of then at the end, the Ark destroying all the Nazis,
where their hubris of wanting to use the Jewish God against them backfired. And I think that that's an important thing to recognize throughout this film.
That's really cool. What would you consider to be the strengths of the film? I think one of the largest strengths of the film is the acting. Harrison Ford plays a phenomenal Indiana Jones. He can play off that cocky character, the scallywag kind, like he does in Star Wars with Han Solo, but Indiana Jones is not just a copy-paste of Han Solo, which is, shows the testament to Harrison Ford as an actor. I think also Indiana Jones is written to be a fairly one-dimensional character. Everyone in this film is written to be very one-dimensional. But Harrison Ford doesn't act Indiana Jones as a flat character. You feel like he has motive and he has personality and understanding, even though he doesn't have a lot of depth to him, because he's meant to be a fun caricature of an adventurer. And I think that that is a very hard thing to do, and I think Harrison Ford did that amazingly. I think also Karen Allen as Marion was amazing. I think Marion in general was given kind of the bum end of the stick in terms of writing. They definitely it was definitely rough in terms of how how much character they gave her and what they gave her, but Marion played her phenomenally. I think another great strength of the film is the fight scenes. And the camera work is phenomenal. In fight scenes, it can get very easy to get lost in the fight. You don't know where the characters are. You don't know how they ended up somewhere. And the choreography of the movement of the characters and filming it was beautifully done. Also, just a lot of times fight scenes can feel, especially ones where the character has almost superhero abilities in terms of surviving a fight and punching his enemies. It can pull you out of the film because it feels unrealistic. But they do a great job of choreographing the fight to be realistic. You feel the punch, you feel when Indy gets knocked down by the big Nazi dude, you feel it. You don't think, oh, that's not realistic. It feels like it was a real fight, and that's actually an incredibly hard thing to do when making a fight scene. So that was incredibly impressive. I think another huge strength of this film is the music. John Williams' score is phenomenal. His music is so well done. He's so good at writing scores. I mean, we have Superman, we have Star Wars, on and on and on. But the amazing part of the music in this film is the integration of it with Indy. Because Indy definitely has a theme song. And even if you don't know that he has a theme song, you do know, because you hear it playing and you realize he has to be around here somewhere. And so that excitement, you get almost this child where could he be? Also, just the ebbing and flowing of the music along with the fight scenes. The punch is timed with the music, and so it feels almost as if everyone is dancing to this song, which I think also leads a bit into the cohesiveness of the fight scenes, because it helps distinguish where the characters are, how the characters are feeling, what is happening with the fight, because you can hear it even if you can't necessarily see it through the shot. What is happening, how the characters are feeling. A huge strength of this film is the special effects. If you look at them nowadays, they definitely feel like 80s special effects. But back in the 80s, that was phenomenal movie editing. I mean, the movie won 4 Oscars, and one was for Best Film Editing, and one was for Best Effects and Visual Effects. If that doesn't say
how great the movie was for their visual effects of the time. Nowadays, we watch the film and it definitely feels like, okay, I've absolutely seen better. But I do think that it gives this movie an extra charm to it. It feels like if it was too realistic and the CGI was bumped up and like we had, we had full CGI, it would feel like the movie was trying to be realistic. But the thing is, nothing about the movie is realistic. Indy's character is not realistic. The Nazis are caricatures, they're not realistic. You could make it feel more realistic, but it would feel like it's trying to be gritty and like realistic and dark, which just is not the theme of Indiana Jones. So I would say I think the overall strength of the film is its simplicity. The camera work is well done and well choreographed, but it's not complicated camera work. It is clear, distinctive storytelling, almost like the panels of a comic. When you're looking at a comic, you don't want confusing comic strips. You want to the point, understandable page. And I think that explains the movie so well. It's to the point and understandable, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have depth and thought that went into making it. And it's the same thing for the characters and the same thing for the special effects. Its simplicity makes it so unique and so vibrant.
Okay, what would you consider to be the weaknesses of the film?
A major weakness of this film is Marion's development. Her character is a bit rough around the edges. She was definitely written half-heartedly. I feel like we got such an interesting insight into her and Indy's life when she's like, I was just a child, when talking about their relationship. And you go, oh, I wonder how this is going to affect them working together. And it just doesn't. She just moves on. And I mean, as much as Karen acts her part amazingly, she can only do so much with the lines she's given. But I wish that they had amplified her more. She is a very independent woman. She's been living throughout her life. She owns a bar without any kind of like man in her life. And I think that Indy comes in cocky and damaged with, definite character flaws. And then he doesn't change his character flaws, but she still falls for him. And I think that her as a character would not have. I think that if Indy had gone through some form of character development, she would have been like, oh, wait, he has changed, but he didn't, and she just lowered her standards. I think a lot of people consider the fact that Indy goes through very little character development as a weakness, but I actually don't think it is. I think that the fun of the movie is that Indiana Jones is just gonna be Indiana Jones. And you just accept it. He's the main character. No one else really matters. But I do think that Marion would not have fallen for him in real life. That's the only weakness, though. It was a great movie.
Oh yeah, those are weaknesses. But why should I watch the film? It's not like there's a cultural legacy that's referenced over and over in media to this day.
Actually, it does. There are so many iconic scenes that are used in media to this day. Either it's a parody or an homage or just using the product or using it because they know what works and they know what is successful. You've probably seen, even if you've never seen Indiana Jones, you've probably seen the boulder scene when he's running from the boulder. You've probably seen the idol scene when he takes the sandbag and the idol and switches them. And you've probably seen something very similar to the car chase scene when he's hanging off the front and he crawls under the car and climbs into the back. That is seen time and time again. Doesn't even have to be referencing Indiana Jones, doesn't have to be joking about it being Indiana Jones. It's just a used scene in media. And also just the face melting scene, that's been parodied over and over and over again. You may have seen bits of Indiana Jones that you've seen reused throughout all of media, and if you haven't seen Indiana Jones, you're definitely missing out on some kind of cultural reference.
Okay, we should watch it. It sounds like a good movie.